Really excited for end of the year right now to hop on and talk a little bit about interesting offense, interesting defense, things that have sort of come our way throughout the year in 2025, which there were a lot. One of the big things that, Pat, we were really excited this year was to add Eric Fawcett to our Slappin Glass ethosphere, or bringing him in on as the third strongest leg of this operation. Eric, really appreciate you coming on, and we've had a blast this year starting to work with you. It brought so much to our whole platform, and so we're excited to kind of dive into this end of the year, looking forward, mailbag smorgasbord of just fun stuff that's come across our way. And so, Eric, thanks for joining us. We're going to kind of do this a bit different. I will kick it to you to kind of lead us through some of these topics today. So once again, thanks, Eric, for joining us. Happy to have you. And I will kick it to you now.
Thank you so much. And it has been just my absolute pleasure to join the team. And I'm so excited for what we've got going on in the future. It still seems like I'm pretty new, having joined in June, but we've already done so much. And I'm even more excited for what's in the future. So for everyone that's hearing my voice for the first time, I coach in the Canadian Elite Basketball League with the Edmonton Stingers, also work in consulting with different college basketball teams mostly, but also a little bit of work in the NBA and some pro leagues around the world. So have a little bit of the perspective of these two guys as well, which will hopefully inform a lot of what I do. And while this is my first time with the voice being on one of the channels, what I've mostly been doing is working on the newsletter and the content as well. And I really want to start with something that we did content wise that really generated all kinds of feedback, people at all different levels that found this to be extremely interesting, extremely helpful. And as soon as we put it out, there was all kinds of coaches talking about the ways they implement this. And this is the jump on the pickup in pick and roll coverage. Patrick, you were someone who did a lot of the work on the video. Could you just talk a little bit about the concept and what you saw?
Yeah, for sure. Quick like backstory, kind of tying it together to in our SoCal Coaches Summit we had on. Oh
It was
man,
Jared Calhoun.
yeah, I'm sorry, drawing a blank on his name, Coach Gerald Calhoun, and this is where he kind of discussed the idea in his talk a little bit that kind of yeah tickled my fancy here a little bit, so to speak. And from there, just kind of dove in, and basically, yeah, the concept is just on within your pick and roll coverage when the ball handler goes to pick up. I think a lot of times the on ball defender chasing over, we say to get back square, but if you see they pick up in a non-threatening neutral spot, to rather jump on the pickup, leave your feet, because at this point, you're kind of playing the odds that they're looking to pass it. And yeah, from my standpoint, of course it interesting to dive into, but I think it's just a great way to generate steals without compromising your base coverage, so to speak, or trying to do something outside of your base coverage in terms of getting super aggressive. But a good technical detail to kind of pick up some steals, just yeah, as you see that ball handler, whether they're good and deep and they've kind of been leveled off by the big, going to pick up, looking to spray corner, or you know kind of throw off the dribble as you recovering just to jump with high hands. And once it's kind of those things, once you see it you can't unsee it, and you see a lot of teams doing
Mhm.
it and a lot of different coverages doing it, and just the effect of it. And it's something that I've then kind of continue to look at, especially with the hedge and plug coverage being so popular over in Europe. You see it all the time there, and then building it out like, you know, to the weak side rotation, kind of that X out defender, supporting the tag defender, also just raising up when they see a ball handler being neutral and not a threat looking to pass, and just getting deflections, getting tips, and kind of generating some steals.
Yeah, that is something that I really like about the concept is the ball handler is never going to be more open than when they make their pickup. Obviously, every split second after the pickup, it gives an opportunity to recover as the defense. So the moment he picks it up is when the passing window is the largest. So to shrink that window
Yeah.
by making yourself big. And another concept that East Tennessee State reached out about it, and they talked about how they call it back pressure, and I kind of
Yeah.
like that wordage, that verbiage as well, as with that kind of concept of providing that kind of secondary, like again, not initial pressure but back pressure, and like you said too, the ability to anticipate what would be the next pass, whether it's that corner skip right away, but if they get a little bit of a step deeper, maybe it's a fill behind, and then it is that back pressure jump. But it was really interesting stuff. But Dan, what were you kind of seeing looking through that edit for the first time, and what you think, even maybe some of the maybe some of the we talked a little bit about some of the benefits, but maybe even some of the negatives or things to consider with it.
Well, one of the things I liked about it was, and Pat just kind of hit on it, that it's not something that's outside necessarily of your base coverage, and it can just be applied, within what you already do. There's a couple other things that like we've done in the past on Slapping Glass that I thought kind of fit into this category. One was dribble handoff coverages and the hand work of whoever's guarding the guy giving the dribble handoff, how their hand shoots in from the inside to kind of disrupt a dribble handoff, which can be a very tough action to guard. This is another case of where just your hand work and where you jump and kind of get deflections blows up what is like a potentially tough coverage. And then the other thing is, a while back we did like on X outs or corner closeouts, where instead of closing out straight to, let's say, someone on the wing when there's someone in the corner, you're closing out and jumping to cut off the pass to the corner. So it's situations like where it's your base coverage, it's what you do defensively is normal, but then like adding like the handwork and the lane pressure at the end, so that because in certain, like in the jump on the pickup situation, you know, defensively you're in a compromised situation when that ball handler is picking it up and they're looking to make that next pass. But what I like is it's just a subtle way to take away the next most obvious pass, or at least make it have airtime. I mean, getting deflection of steel is obviously the ultimate thing, but really what it does when you look at a lot of the film is it just takes away where the first easy read of the ball handler is gone, or it's more forced, or there's more airtime on the pass out so you can get back to hole. So I really liked it as, okay, you have your normal coverage pick and roll, or you have your closeout and how you close out to the corner, or you have your handoff coverage. And here's just another like subtle, very smart way that we saw that teams can implement this and sort of blow up some of the more difficult coverages to guard. Now, like Pat said, the one, I guess, potential drawback is if, you do get caught in the air and they're able to move the ball and cut, or, you could be compromised. But I feel like, yeah, it's just hard for an offense to really take advantage of that. And so, you teach guys, do you not want to leave your feet? Is that a philosophy of stay down hands? That's a personal choice. But I think like from what we saw from the film, and we're looking at Richard Pitino when he was at New Mexico, was a lot of the film that we got. Really good stuff. I mean, just interesting to think about how maybe you don't do all of it, but can you add something like that into what you already do? I thought was a really big takeaway for me from the whole thing.
Yeah, looking at some of the ways that it could be kind of countered, you sometimes will see that short roll give and go where the ball handler will get his defender in the air on the pickup, try to hit maybe a short roll and then make a basket cut. But it's one of those things. Do you think you're losing a game? Like, do you think you'll give that up 20 or 30 times in the game? Like, probably not. You might give it up once or twice, and maybe that's just the tax that you pay. But that is something that, I think could be really effective in a lot of different coverages. And I also think about, yes, it will hopefully come up with deflections and steals, but I even think about how maybe at the high school level, if out of a pick and roll you're able to hit a corner skip, maybe that's good enough to get an open shot. But then if you get up to the college level, the difference between a pass that's in the shooting pocket and out of the shooting pocket is the difference between a contested shot or an open shot. And if you get to the pro level, the difference between hitting someone in the shooting pocket or not is whether or not they're even able to get that shot off or not. And I think about if you just change the angle enough that the pass is no longer one that is hit in the pocket, but is one that's a little bit out of area or off target, like that could be enough even the more you get up levels. So I think that's big, but of course the ultimate goal would be, can you get a deflection? Can you get something going the other way that's numbers? And I think that speaks to a bigger trend right now. We're looking at talking about different coverages and things that teams can do within different coverages. A lot of it is geared towards how can we create more turnovers? So how is that something you guys have looked at and thought about in the last year?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, that you know, I think this is, we've looked at a lot, and of course, talking about this is one we talked to. We highlighted like the steal to spin. I know UCLA does it a lot with Coach Cronin. We looked at some other teams just again within their coverage. If they, a team that's pretty heavy in the gap or plays more kind of a pack line, let's say, but if they see a drive going away and a dribbler playing blind, we're most likely they're going to try to spin if you kind of funnel them to that short corner. Again, leveling off a drive where the most thing is they're going to either spin back or stride, kind of that stride stop. Just sending a double. Again, stuff like that where I feel it doesn't, it's smart aggression, let's say, and it doesn't compromise your base. You're not just blindly doubling, you're not wildly doubling. Um, I've enjoyed highlighting that in the past. I really, from my end though, where that takes me is like how to teach it, and now maybe that's another conversation, like building these concepts with everything on the hand. But um, I think that's interesting how you build kind of your rotations and put yourself in positions to kind of take advantage of those moments. We've
Yeah.
also looked at like a ton of like hitting, and now maybe
Yeah.
this is, yeah, I mean, this is like finding the right moments, whether end of clock isolations, coming out of ATOs, like just smart ways to maybe roll the dice and steal a possession. Now, these are ways maybe getting away from like jump on the pickup, like technical, but more like raising your aggression tactically. That could be out of your base and not for everyone. I get it, but I think those are really clever ways, two things that, I've enjoyed looking at and just seeing how teams do it. Probably the team I watch the most is like Valencia this year. I mean, they're doing a lot of what we're going to probably talk about today. And one of the things that you can just see it's in their base, like anytime it's under 10 seconds and like offense breaks down and the offense starts to isolate, like without fail, they just send the hit and the corners know, and like they raise up to get that, try to put pressure on that one pass out. And um, to
So,
me,
and
I think
Pat,
like, yeah,
just for those listening, maybe
yeah.
like what a hit is real
Yeah.
fast.
No,
Yeah.
thanks for stopping me. Yeah, a hit is basically where you'll send the double to like usually from the full side, two or more side, you send the top guy to go double the ball. So a lot of times we've seen it either end a game isolation to, of course, take it out of a primary scorer, or I think too, teams are using cleverly, like you'll switch. So you have a big on a perimeter mismatch, and then they'll go double it as the offensive guy kind of starts to go to his bag.
Hmm.
That
As Jeff would.
they're not
Yeah.
ready. Yeah, they're not ready to make like the quick pass out. So that's what I refer to as a hit.
And thanks for clarifying what hitting is not what my kids were doing to each other right before we recorded
Yeah.
here. Um, but one of the things that I was going to add on top when Eric was asking about disruptive stuff or jumping on the pick, these other things is we've done a lot, and I think we see it a lot in Europe. Just these hits or ultra aggression on sideline out of bounds, end of quarter, ATOs too, where a team is just kind of just not ready for it. I think one of the things that reminds me, and then one of the a thing that we did Pat maybe 2 years ago now was these traps in the backcourt where if a five or four
Yeah.
man takes it out, throws it to your point guard, and just starts jogging up the court, well, they're just going to go hit double the ball into the backcourt while your five man is just blindly running up the court. Like so, like I said, those are a little bit more turning up the pressure. They're a little less, like you said, technical, but I think interesting ways of, after timeouts, sideline out of bounds, sometimes baseline out of bounds.
Yeah.
I think like your team offensively is not always ready to handle like a quick trap because you're coming out like, hey, I'm trying to do this. We're trying to run this set. We're trying to
They're
go to
just
this guy.
yeah, they're just
Yeah.
trying to remember the play that you just drew
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Three of your guys weren't even listening to timeout. They're trying to, and all of a sudden, boom, you jump on them. So I think those are the interesting little things like we've seen. And Pat said, I think teams we've seen in the ACB a lot are very ultra aggressive on
Yeah.
some of these things. I remember going back to maybe it was our first conversation with Jeff Van Gundy on the podcast when he talked about with Team USA. It was just a nightmare to get the ball in bounds against Argentina,
Yeah.
and how hard it was to get into offense from the sideline of bounds because they just overly pressured sideline stuff. So that would be my other thing, Eric, to your question of what are the things we've seen.
Mm. And this is really interesting as well. So I really like to look to other sports for ideas of innovation, analytics, which I'm sure we'll come into at a couple different points in this conversation. But just looking at what some of the bigger analytical breakthroughs have been in different sports, whether it be baseball, American football, European soccer, and of course what we do. Something that seems to be a general trend in all sports is that when you look at the kind of breakthroughs in terms of tactics and analytics, it's almost always to tilt in a more aggressive strategy. There has seldom been developments in sport that have been, okay, let's wind back the aggressiveness. Let's play more conservatively. It almost always is, oh, we can crank up the intensity. We can crank up the aggressiveness in this way. And when I look back at our year of content, particularly on the defensive side of the floor, and Patrick, I mean, you did a really good job of laying out some of the stuff we've looked at this year. Pretty much all of, I shouldn't say all of them, but most of them were about being more aggressive in different coverages. I think about different places to double from was another one that we talked about, doubling the post from the top, which was something a lot of teams were scared to do for a lot because it was a shorter 3-point look. So I'll throw this one right back to you, Dan, and then I will be interested in what you think, Patrick. But as we even talk about what we did this year content wise, looking towards some of the trends of the game in 2026, what do you think about the like? Do you think that just cranking up the aggressiveness, being more aggressive, like, what do you think about that trend?
Yeah.
Is that something you think that's going to continue, or what's the case there?
I think it's interesting because something just talking about with coaches, staff, all that stuff, where you do or do not turn up the aggressiveness, these like little moments of the game, after free throws, ATOs, things like that. But maybe like zooming out for a second, I think there is, like you mentioned, increased aggressiveness. Let's say like perimeter, backcourt oriented, where you're taking chances, doubles, digging in gaps, taking advantage of ATOs, but then also like being conservative and really solid around the rim, not fouling and making teams earn 2-point field goal percentage. So it's like, how do you turn up the aggression in these other areas? Like you mentioned, probably a good idea, but then also be really compact and solid at the rim. And I think we did a breakdown of Troy in like just their wall ups at the rim, like just so elite where it's like you can't, it's really hard to score against them in transition, but even just like as they bring the help side defender, they're jumping, walling up, like they're just so solid there. They're not going to necessarily get a steal per se, but they're going to make you earn it around the rim. But then these other teams where they're going to also be more aggressive, let's say other parts of the game. So I think it's kind of both. Like, can you build a system where you're taking chances that are smart, but you're also not, just wild and trying to swing for extra steals or block shots at the rim and put people on the line. So I think that would be like something, Pat, maybe that I would say is just what I've seen and what could be, I don't want to say it's a trend, but just something that's interesting to think about.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. I enjoyed putting that breakdown together that we did. It also tied in well with 2 years ago, maybe, or we did also looking at um, how Alba Berlin under Aito was, and that's kind of spread throughout Europe, like contesting 3-point shots, especially as
Yes.
the rules changed to protect shooters and their halo. You could just see that Alba Berlin really stressed, and even when we had Coach Gonzalez on as well of Alba Berlin talked about it. They get like they wanted to invade the shooter space, but in a legal way with a wide stance and high hands, kind of keeping their feet. So there was no, they didn't have any incidental contact, and of course they allowed the shooter to land. But just finding these ways to be disruptive is I think when you go with even like walling up, like just not settling for like we're going to try to take a charge, but smart physical disruption. And I think to your question, Eric, when you ask it, like my mind goes to that, like, we talked about ways to dial up maybe some steals, but just overall, I feel like defense is just finding ways within their personnel with whatever they're comfortable to be disruptive. So, like we talked about, we looked at a number of ways to double the post from the top, double off of cuts. And I think that's where my mind goes. And where just as you continue to watch the season play out, just where different teams are finding ways to be as disruptive as possible. Um, And I think this is why we're seeing a lot of tagging up in my
Yeah.
mind, that teams are just, of course, to get offensive rebounds, but to build their defense immediately on the board and not, we had Coach Francesco Tabellini on, who's now with Paris. And I mean, he tags up and he talked about canceling the pauses. And um, we talked about tagging up a lot and the whole system behind it, but where I like am really curious now is teams kind of amp up pace, amp up disruption, and tag up. Like, can they then also start to build in like on successful tags these moments to then like even press or run and jump out of it,
Mhm.
like to even dial it up more. And I guess that's where I'm curious. You see, I think it's obviously very situational and it arises as nothing you do all the time because it is kind of a little chaotic and you're never going to be perfectly organized. But finding again some ways to dial up the aggression there. Like if you are a tagging team, can you get more run and jumps? And really try to just make everything disruptive for the offense. Is where my mind goes and where I see the game over the last couple of years really with defenses like not so much sitting back, but more taking the fight to the offense. I think, we've had great conversations analytically, and it always kind of bears out that offense has the biggest say on, let's say, the defensive analytics of the opponents. And I think, this is a way to maybe take the fight to them, maybe steal
Yeah.
some, get some steals, and just not let the offense have so much say as they already do have.
Fortune favors the bold, right? Is that a
Ex-
Bitcoin? It's something, but it's true.
Worked out for them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and seeing the way that the game is officiated, I would say in most leagues around the world, and seeing just how offenses are getting more sophisticated, and you two have played a huge role in that with Slapping Glass. Hopefully, I can put my own mark on that soon with you guys. But
Yeah.
it also just seems like there was perhaps an era where you could sit in a very conservative coverage and maybe just play drop pick and roll coverage and that would be enough. But it just seems like as things get more sophisticated, you were talking fortune favors the bold. I was thinking of a game theory strategy,
Mhm.
talking about dominated strategies, and it just seems like when the way the game is officiated, the way the game is played, it just often seems like a offense that is executing at a high level will beat a defense that is executing at a high level, perhaps because of the edge of just the way the sport is structured, or perhaps the way it's officiated. But it does seem like, yeah, the days of just being able to be totally conservative and waiting for the offense to beat themselves is probably not going to work in a lot of good leagues.